Imagine yourself scrolling through videos, binge-watching your favorite series, or catching a live event on a screen. Moments that feel as natural as breathing. Now, what if I told you the mind behind this world of screens was a teenage farm boy who sketched his dream in the dirt, only to be forgotten by the very world he transformed? I'm a scientist with 15 years of digging into the stories of unsung geniuses, and today I'm pulling you into the life of Philo Farnsworth, the true father of television. At 14, he imagined a device that would connect humanity, but his journey was a roller coaster of triumph, betrayal, and heartbreak. Why don't we know his name? Stay with me through this tale of a dreamer who fought corporate giants and paid the ultimate price. By the end, you'll see your screen differently, and you'll want to shout his story from the rooftops. Welcome to Obscure Minds, where we uncover the hidden heroes of science. Let's dive into a story that'll spark your curiosity and maybe even break your heart. As a scientist who spent 15 years chasing the stories behind breakthroughs, I've learned one truth: genius doesn't need a fancy lab or a big city. It can ignite anywhere, even in the middle of nowhere. Let me take you back to 1920, to a potato field in Rigby, Idaho, where a 14-year-old boy named Philo Farnsworth was about to see something no one else could. Picture him, reins in hand, guiding a horse-drawn plow under a blistering sun. Dust clings to his clothes, and the horizon stretches endlessly, just rows of dirt and sky. But Philo's not just plowing a field, he's plowing through ideas, his mind buzzing like a telegraph wire. This isn't the story of a privileged prodigy with every tool at his fingertips. It's the tale of a kid from nowhere, with nothing but a hunger to understand the world and a dream to reshape it. Philo was born on August 19, 1906, in a log cabin in Beaver, Utah, a place so remote it felt like the edge of the earth. His parents, Louis and Serena, were Mormon farmers, raising 5 kids on hard work and faith. There was no electricity in their home, no hum of machines, just the glow of kerosene lamps and the rhythm of chores. Imagine growing up like that. No outlets to plug in your dreams, no screens to spark your imagination. Yet Philo was different. By age 6, he was sketching gadgets on scraps of paper, fascinated by anything mechanical. His mother later recalled finding him dismantling a hand-cranked telephone, not to break it, but to figure out how voices traveled through wires. That curiosity wasn't just a quirk, it was a fire that nothing could extinguish. I've studied inventors whose breakthroughs changed history, but Philo stands out because he had so little to work with. No fancy schools, no mentors handing him answers. Instead, he had magazines, popular science, radio news, that arrived like treasures in the mail. He'd read them cover to cover, memorizing diagrams of dynamos and vacuum tubes. By 12, when his family moved to a new farm in Idaho with a generator, Philo was electrified. Literally. He rigged the generator to power lights, taught himself to repair it, and even built an electric washing machine for his mother. Can you imagine the look on her face? A kid, barely a teenager, turning a chore into a marvel. That's when I realized as a scientist that Philo wasn't just smart. He was relentless, driven by a need to make life better, not just for himself, but for everyone. Now, let's return to that field in 1920. Philo's plowing, the horse trudging forward, carving neat parallel lines in the earth. It's a mundane moment, right? Wrong. Something clicks in his brain, a spark that changes everything. Those lines, they're not just dirt. They remind him of how a picture could be broken down, scanned row by row, turned into electrical signals, and sent somewhere else to be rebuilt. It's the seed of electronic television, born not in a lab, but in a boy's imagination, surrounded by nothing but fields and sky. I get chills thinking about it, because moments like this are rare. Einstein had his train, Newton his apple, and Philo, he had a plow. As a scientist, I can tell you, this wasn't luck. It was a mind unbound by limits, seeing patterns where others saw only toil. Philo didn't keep this idea to himself. At 15, he was in high school, soaking up chemistry and physics from a teacher named Justin Tolman. Tolman was no ordinary educator. He saw something in Philo, a spark worth nurturing. One day, Philo stayed after class, chalk in hand, and sketched his idea on the blackboard, a device he called an image dissector. It was a vacuum tube that could capture light, convert it into electrons, and transmit it as a moving picture. Tolman was flawed. He'd taught plenty of bright kids, but this was beyond comprehension. A teenager outlining a technology that could outshine anything in the world's top labs. Tolman kept that sketch, not knowing it would one day prove Philo's claim to history. What strikes me most, digging into Philo's story, is how his lack of resources shaped him. In a big city, he might have been funneled into someone else's project, his ideas diluted. But out here, in the quiet of rural America, he was free to dream big. He wasn't reading about other scientists' failures, telling him television was impossible. He didn't know that experts like John Logie Baird were stuck on clunky mechanical systems, spinning discs that could barely show a face. Philo's mind was a blank slate, and that made him dangerous, not to people, but to the status quo. He believed moving images could do more than entertain. He saw them teaching kids in remote towns, sharing stories across oceans, even stopping wars by showing people we're all human. That vision, so pure and bold, is why his story grabs me, and I hope it's grabbing you. But dreams don't bloom in a vacuum. Life wasn't easy for the Farnsworths. By 1924, Philo's father died, leaving the family in debt. At 18, Philo enrolled at Brigham Young University as a special student. His grades so stellar, they bent the rules for him. But money ran out, and he had to drop out, taking jobs fixing radios and sweeping floors for a charity campaign in Salt Lake City. It crushed him, but it didn't dim his fire. Every night, he'd sketch, read, plan. He was saving up, not for a car or a house, but for a chance to build his image dissector. That's the kind of focus I admire as a scientist, when the world says stop, but you keep going. In 1926, Philo's luck turned. He was 19, working for two businessmen, George Everson and Leslie Gorrell, who ran a community chest campaign. One day they asked about his dreams, probably expecting something small. Instead, Philo pitched television, his wild, impossible idea. To their credit, they didn't laugh. They saw the same spark Tolman had, and they took a gamble. $6,000 to fund a lab, plus a promise of more if he could make it work. It was a fortune for a kid with holes in his shoes. Philo didn't hesitate. He married his high school sweetheart, Elmer Pem Gardner, a woman as brave as he was curious, and they headed to Los Angeles. Pem wasn't just a wife, she was his partner, his confidant, the one who'd hold him up when the world tried to knock him down. That spark in a field was only the start, a flicker of what could be, and now it was time to fan it into something real. Picture a cluttered room at 202 Green Street, San Francisco, 1927. No gleaming machines, no rows of scientists in white coats, just a 21-year-old Philo surrounded by glass tubes, tangled wires, and a dream so big it could barely fit in this makeshift lab. As a scientist who spent years in the trenches of discovery, I can tell you, this is where magic happens. Not in comfort, but in chaos, where every failure feels like a punch and every success like a sunrise. Philo wasn't just building a machine, he was building the future, television born from a teenager's sketch. But turning that vision into reality, that was a battle of wits, grit, and heart, one that would test every ounce of his resolve. Philo's lab wasn't much to look at. A few tables, some borrowed equipment, and a handful of believers. Pem, who was more than a partner, she was his rock. Her brother, Cliff Gardner, who rolled up his sleeves, and a small crew of tinkerers willing to bet on a kid's dream. The $6,000 from Everson and Gorrell was a lifeline, but it was burning fast. Rent, glassblowers for custom tubes, arc lamps. Every penny counted, and there weren't many left. I've worked in labs where budgets were tight, but Philo's setup was next level. No safety net, no big grants, just a ticking clock and a vision that wouldn't let him sleep. What was he chasing? Not fame or riches, though those might have been nice. Philo wanted a fully electronic television system, something no one had cracked. Across the ocean, folks like John Logie Baird were messing with mechanical setups, spinning discs that churned out fuzzy, jerky images like a bad flipbook. Philo knew that wouldn't cut it. His image dissector was different, a vacuum tube that could scan light with electrons, breaking an image into lines faster than any gear could spin. It was elegant, audacious, and untested. He was teaching himself high-vacuum physics on the fly, reading textbooks late into the night, his eyes bleary but bright. As a scientist, I'm in awe of that hustle, building the plane while you're falling. The lab had its quirks. San Francisco was deep in prohibition, and the team's bright lights and odd gear raised eyebrows. Pem later laughed about cops sniffing around, thinking they were brewing moonshine. Instead, they were brewing history. By mid-1927, Philo was ready to test his idea. Picture the scene. A glass slide with a single straight line, lit by an arc lamp aimed at the image dissector. In another room, a receiver, a crude screen, barely a few inches wide. Philo's hands shook as he flipped the switch. Silence, then a hum. On the screen, a faint wobbly line appeared. It wasn't HD, wasn't even close, but it was there. Philo broke the quiet with a yell, "There you are, electronic television." The room erupted, Cliff whooping, Pem beaming, everyone knowing they'd just seen the impossible come to life. I've had my own lab moments where a result clicks, and let me tell you, it's electric. For Philo, that line wasn't just a test, it was proof his brainchild could breathe. September 7, 1927 marked the birth of modern television. Though the world didn't know it yet. The team celebrated, but Philo was already thinking ahead. One line wasn't enough. He wanted faces, motion, stories flickering across screens everywhere. He tweaked the dissector, boosted the signal, dreamed up cathode ray tubes for better displays. Every step was a gamble. New tubes could crack, circuits could fry, and money was a constant ghost haunting the lab. By 1928, the pressure was on. Everson and Gorrell, sweating their investment, pushed for a public demo. Philo wasn't ready, but he couldn't say no. He chose an image that spoke to their wallets, a $sign. On a sweltering day, reporters crammed into the lab, skeptical but curious. When that $sign flickered onto the screen, sharp, unmistakable, the room went wild. Flashbulbs popped, notebooks scribbled. The San Francisco Chronicle called him a young genius. For a hot second, Philo was a star, his name in headlines from California to New York. As a scientist, I know how rare that feels, when the world catches up to your vision, even for a moment. But that flicker of triumph was only the beginning, and stars don't shine without casting shadows. By 1930, the air had shifted. Philo's lab at 202 Green Street was still humming, but success has a way of drawing eyes, and not all of them were friendly. As a scientist, I've seen how ideas can spark jealousy or greed, and Philo was about to learn that lesson the hard way, stepping from the glow of creation into a storm he never saw coming. Enter the Radio Corporation of America, RCA, a name that carried weight like a sledgehammer. RCA wasn't just a company, it was a titan, controlling radio broadcasting and sniffing out the next big thing. Its leader, David Sarnoff, was a visionary in his own right, but not the kind who dreamed of unity. Sarnoff saw television as a goldmine, a way to dominate homes the way RCA ruled airwaves. Born in Russia, he'd climbed from a telegraph boy to a mogul, and he didn't climb by playing nice. By 1930, RCA had labs, money, and ambition, but their television efforts were stuck. Their top scientist, Vladimir Zworykin, had ideas, but no working system. Zworykin, another Russian émigré, was brilliant, with a PhD and a knack for electronics. In 1923, he'd patented an iconoscope, a camera tube for television, but it was a sketch, not a machine. RCA needed a breakthrough, and Philo's name was starting to echo. Zworykin caught wind of Philo's work. Those headlines about a kid in San Francisco weren't hard to spot. In April 1930, he knocked on Philo's door, asking for a tour. Philo, all of 24, was flattered. He'd grown up in a world of trust, where ideas were shared over chalkboards. Like with Justin Tolman, Zworykin presented himself as a Westinghouse engineer, curious about the image dissector. Philo, ever the optimist, let him in. For 3 days, Zworykin poked around, asking questions, taking notes. Philo's team even built him a dissector tube to study, free of charge. Zworykin called it a beautiful instrument, and left with a smile. What Philo didn't know was that Zworykin wasn't with Westinghouse anymore. He was RCA's man, sent to scout the competition. I've been in labs where collaboration feels like camaraderie, but this was espionage dressed as curiosity. Zworykin wired a 700-word telegram to RCA, spilling every detail of Philo's system. RCA didn't waste time. They started building their own dissector, tweaking Zworykin's iconoscope to mirror Philo's ideas. Sarnoff saw the prize, control of television, from patents to profits. But Philo wasn't invisible. He had patents pending, a growing reputation, and a stubborn streak. So Sarnoff tried to buy him out. Late in 1930, RCA offered $100,000 for Philo's patents, a fortune for a kid from Utah. There was a catch. Philo would have to join RCA, work under their rules, hand over his dream. To Sarnoff, it was a done deal. To Philo, it was a deal-breaker. Philo said no. He wasn't in it for money. He wanted to steer television's future, to make it a tool for learning, not just a box for ads. That choice lit a fuse. RCA didn't shrug and walk away. Sarnoff wasn't used to hearing no, and he had a playbook. If you can't buy it, break it. In 1931, RCA filed an interference suit, claiming Zworykin's 1923 iconoscope patent predated Philo's 1927 dissector. It was a bold move. Zworykin's patent was theoretical, while Philo's system worked. But RCA had lawyers, deep pockets, and a knack for rewriting history. The suit wasn't just about credit, it was about control. If RCA won, Philo's patents could be invalidated, his work absorbed, his name erased. The legal fight hit like a storm. Philo was no lawyer. He was a tinkerer, happiest with a soldering iron, not a subpoena. Every court date pulled him from the lab, drained his funds, and chipped away at his spirit. He'd moved to Philadelphia in 1931, partnering with Philco, a smaller electronics firm, to keep his work alive. Philco gave him a bigger lab, more hands, but the pressure was crushing. Pem, now raising their toddler son, Philo Jr., became his anchor. She typed patents, sketched circuits, and held him when the stress boiled over. I've seen colleagues buckle under less, but Philo kept going, fueled by a belief that his invention was bigger than any lawsuit. Still, the toll was real. He smoked more, slept less, and the spark in his eyes dimmed just a bit. The RCA battle wasn't just paperwork. It was personal. Zworykin, in hearings, downplayed Philo's work, claiming his own ideas came first. Sarnoff spun RCA as television's pioneer, glossing over Philo's demos. Meanwhile, Philo had to prove his case, dragging out old sketches like the one from Tolman's blackboard in 1922. That drawing, lines and tubes from a 15-year-old's hand, became his shield, proof his idea predated Zworykin's. As a scientist, I'm struck by how fragile genius can be. One sketch, one teacher's faith, could mean the difference between history and oblivion. Philo's life wasn't all courtrooms. He kept innovating, pushing his system to show movies, live scenes, even stars at night through a telescope. In 1931, he transmitted a broadcast across Philadelphia, a glimpse of what TV could be. But every step forward felt like 2 steps back. RCA's suit loomed, a shadow over every victory, and yet Philo wasn't just fighting for patents. He was fighting for his place in a world that didn't always value dreamers. A struggle that would soon take him from the lab to a stage where the whole world was watching. The fight with RCA was a storm, but Philo's vision burned brighter than any shadow, carrying him to a moment that would define his legacy. It's August 25, 1934, and the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia is alive with anticipation. Picture a crowd, scientists, reporters, curious locals, craning their necks toward a small stage. At its center stands Philo, just 28, his face lined with the weight of years beyond his age. I know that feeling, when your work clicks and the world sees what you've seen all along. It's magic. By 1934, Philo had come a long way from that dusty San Francisco lab. After moving to Philadelphia, he'd built a bigger team, a better lab, and a system that could stun. His image dissector was sharper now, capturing live images with a clarity that mechanical systems couldn't touch. The Franklin Institute demo was no small deal. Philo's setup was simple but jaw-dropping. A camera tube in one room, a receiver in another, wired to display what the camera saw. When he flipped the switch, The screen glowed, and there was Pem, her face beaming back at the crowd. Gasps rippled through the room. This wasn't a grainy shadow, it was Pem, live, her smile clear as day. Reporters scrambled, onlookers whispered in awe. For a moment, Philo was the man who'd brought pictures to life. The Philadelphia Inquirer called it a miracle of science, and headlines spread like wildfire. Philo didn't stop there. By 1935, his lab was broadcasting short programs, music, skits, even experiments with color, to a small network of receivers. He dreamed of every home having a screen, not for mindless chatter, but for learning and connection. Imagine it. A farmer in Idaho watching a lecture from Paris, or kids in a city slum seeing the stars explained live. That was Philo's heart, a belief that television could lift people up, bridge gaps, maybe even heal divides. What sets Philo apart is that vision. He wasn't chasing fame, he wanted impact, the kind that lasts generations. But dreams don't shield you from reality, and Philo's reality was brutal. The RCA lawsuit was a constant drain. In 1935, the US Patent Office ruled in Philo's favor, confirming his 1927 patent held priority over Zworykin's 1923 iconoscope. It was a win, a big one. His teenage sketch, preserved by Tolman, had tipped the scales. But RCA appealed, dragging the case into a quagmire. Every hearing pulled Philo from his lab, every bill bled his funds dry. I've seen colleagues tangled in red tape, but this was next level, a young man up against a machine that didn't tire. The stress wasn't just financial, it was personal. Philo was a father now, with 2 boys, Philo Jr. and Kenneth, and Pem was juggling motherhood with lab work. The family lived modestly, their dreams pinned on a technology that wasn't yet paying off. Philo pushed himself to the edge, working late, smoking heavily, his nerves fraying like old wires. In 1935, he suffered a nervous breakdown, a collapse that left him bedridden for weeks. Pem later wrote that she'd find him staring at the ceiling, muttering about patents and betrayals. As a scientist, it breaks my heart to think of that fire, his unstoppable curiosity flickering under such weight. Yet Pem was there, pulling him back, reminding him why he'd started. Even as he healed, the world was shifting. In 1936, Philo struck a deal with AT&T, sharing patents to fund his work. He moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana, founding the Farnsworth Television and Radio Corporation, a company to call his own. It felt like a fresh start. His broadcasts grew bolder, live music, talks, even a crude cartoon. By 1938, he was demonstrating television at fairs and expos, crowds gathering like moths to a flame. Each demo was a reminder. Philo's system worked, and it was beautiful. Newspapers dubbed him the father of television, a title that felt earned. For a moment, it seemed the tide was turning. Maybe he'd outrun RCA, maybe his dream would soar. But cracks were forming. RCA's appeal kept the lawsuit alive, and their labs were catching up, tweaking Zworykin's iconoscope with Philo's ideas. Sarnoff was planning a splashy debut, claiming television for RCA. Philo saw it coming, and it stung. He'd always been private, focused on the work, but now he felt the narrative slipping. At home, money was tight, and Philo's health stayed shaky. He started to question television's path, not his invention, but what it might become. He snapped at a colleague, "Is this what I worked for? A circus?" As a scientist, I get that disillusionment, when your creation grows legs and runs where you didn't expect. The sweetest victory came in 1939, when RCA agreed to pay royalties, $1 million, a fortune. It was validation. Philo's patent stood, his claim secure. But it wasn't joy he felt. It was exhaustion. The fight had taken years, health, peace. He was 33, but felt older, his idealism bruised. He kept working, tweaking his system, dreaming of new uses, but the world was about to change again, pulling him from the spotlight into a quieter, harder fight. That spotlight had burned bright, but the world doesn't pause for dreamers, and Philo was about to learn how fast glory fades. It's 1941, and war engulfs the globe. The battle isn't just overseas, it's inside his heart. The man who lit up crowds with flickering screens is slipping into the shadows. His invention is poised to explode, but the war freezes it, and the giants he fought are circling. By the late 1930s, Philo had tasted victory. His royalty deal with RCA was a hard-won acknowledgement that he had birthed electronic television. His Farnsworth Television and Radio Corporation was humming, producing sets and dreaming big. But World War II changed everything. Factories that built TV tubes now churned out radar and bombs. Television development halted, deemed non-essential. Philo's company, already lean, couldn't compete with RCA's deep pockets. By 1941, sales stalled, debts mounted, and the dream of mass-market TV faded into the war's fog. As a scientist, I've seen how external forces can derail even the brightest minds. For Philo, the war wasn't just a pause, it was a gut punch. His company limped along, but by 1949, it was over. He sold Farnsworth Television to ITT, a conglomerate that kept him on as a consultant but stripped him of control. Imagine that. The man who invented television reduced to a name on a paycheck, his lab no longer his own. It wasn't just a business loss, it was personal. Philo had poured his soul into those screens, believing they'd educate and unite. Now he was on the sidelines, watching others steer his creation's future. But Philo wasn't done dreaming. If television was paused, he'd find new frontiers. In the 1940s and 50s, he turned to wild projects. Radar systems, infrared scopes, air traffic control tech. His boldest leap came in the 1950s, when he patented the fusor, a device to create small-scale nuclear fusion reactions. Picture it, a tabletop machine sparking the process that powers stars. It wasn't practical for energy production, but it was a glimpse of Philo's genius, untethered from budgets or boards. I've worked on projects that felt like moonshots, and I admire Philo's nerve. Most would have quit. He doubled down, chasing ideas that danced on the edge of impossible. Yet the world wasn't kind to his efforts. Fusion was a tough sell, too far out for investors, too costly for a man whose savings were gone. By the 1960s, Philo was back in Utah, running a small lab at Brigham Young University, scraping by on grants. The fusor flickered, but funding dried up, and the project stalled. Money wasn't the only problem. Philo's health was crumbling. Decades of stress, smoking, and overwork had taken their toll. His wife, Pem, saw the change most. The boy who'd sketched television was now wrestling with despair. He drank to dull the pain, a habit that worried Pem and their 4 sons. As a scientist, it's tough to see brilliance dimmed, not by failure, but by a world that didn't know how to value it. Disillusionment crept in, and it wasn't just about money or health. Philo watched television grow, but not the way he'd hoped. By the 1950s, screens were everywhere. Game shows, soap operas, ads for toothpaste and cars. He'd imagined classrooms, global talks, ideas crossing borders. Instead, he saw what he called a wasteland. At home, he banned his boys from watching TV, saying it dulled the mind. Can you imagine the irony? The inventor of television shutting it off in his own house. I feel for him, not because he was wrong, but because he cared so deeply. His dream had wings, but it flew where he couldn't follow. There were moments of light, though, and one shines brightest. On July 20th, 1969, Philo and Pem turned on their TV, something they rarely did, to watch the moon landing. NASA had chosen a camera based on Philo's image dissector to beam Neil Armstrong's steps to Earth. As that grainy image filled their living room, Philo's eyes welled up. He turned to Pem and said, "This has made it all worthwhile." For one night, his vision came true. Television united the world, not in ads or antics, but in awe. As a scientist, I get chills thinking about it. A moment where the boy from Rigby saw his dream touch the stars. But moments like that were rare. The 1960s weren't kind. In 1957, Philo appeared on I've Got a Secret, where panelists failed to guess his claim to fame. The irony stung. He'd created the medium that ignored him. By 1970, he was in debt, his fusion lab shuttered, his body failing. Pneumonia hit hard, and Philo, once unstoppable, was fading. Pem fought for him, keeping his patents alive, telling his story to anyone who'd listen. She was his anchor, as always, But even she couldn't stop time. The quiet of Philo's later years wasn't the end, though. It was a question, one that lingers as we look back. Why don't we know his name? I'm standing at a crossroads every scientist dreads, the moment when a genius becomes a footnote. It's 1971, and Philo has passed away at 64 with barely a whisper in the headlines. Why does the father of television linger in the shadows while others bask in the glow of his creation? This isn't just about Philo, it's about the forces that bury dreamers, from corporate spin to society's short memory. Let's start with RCA and David Sarnoff. By the time Philo died, RCA was a mythmaker. Sarnoff, who'd fought Philo over patents, knew the power of a story. At the 1939 World's Fair, he declared RCA the hero, Zworykin the inventor, Philo a blip. By 1949, NBC called Sarnoff the father of television, a title that stuck. As a scientist, I've seen how narratives bend truth. RCA had the cash, the airwaves, the clout to make their version loudest, and loud wins. It wasn't just spin. RCA played the long game. They built a television empire, branding every screen with their logo. Philo's company folded into ITT, leaving no empire to carry his name. Compare that to Edison's General Electric or Ford's car dynasty. As Paul Shatskin writes, inventors we remember are survived by their companies. Philo had no PR team, no skyscraper with his name. His patents were gold, but patents don't tell stories to school kids or splash ads on billboards. RCA did, and they wrote Philo out. Philo wasn't blameless, not in a cruel way, but a human one. He was a creator, not a promoter. Unlike Edison, who staged photo ops, or Bell, who built a telecom giant, Philo shunned the spotlight. He'd rather tweak a circuit than give a speech. In the 1930s, when reporters swarmed, he let Pem handle interviews, preferring the lab's hum. I get it. Many scientists are wired for ideas, not fame. But in a world that loves showmen, Philo's quiet passion was a liability. He didn't fight for the narrative, and history rewards those who do. His disillusionment didn't help. By the 1950s, television wasn't his dream anymore. He'd pictured it teaching physics to farmers, uniting nations. Instead, he got game shows and cigarette ads. He called it an idiot box, a betrayal of his vision. That bitterness kept him from claiming his place. In 1957, on I've Got a Secret, he could have shouted, "I made this." But he smiled, took his prize, a carton of Winston's, and went home. As a scientist, I feel that choice. When your creation strays, it's tempting to walk away, but walking away leaves the story to others. Society played its part too. The 20th century worshipped brands, not lone wolves. Television became RCA, CBS, NBC, not Farnsworth. We love origin stories, but we want them tidy. One hero, one logo. Philo's tale, lawsuits, breakdowns, a kid from Utah, was too raw. By the 1960s, America was hooked on TV's glamour, not its roots. Sarnoff's polished myth fit better than Philo's struggle. Even today, we name-drop Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, tied to Apple or Tesla. But lone inventors, they fade unless they fight to stay loud. Philo didn't, and we let him slip. Then there's how we value innovation. Philo's television was a tool, but tools don't always honor their makers. The wheel, the printing press, who names their inventors? Television became so big, so woven into life, that its origin blurred. By 1971, screens were furniture, not miracles. His moon landing moment was a flash of pride, but people marveled at NASA, not the man behind the lens. As a scientist, I see this pattern. Creators build the world, then vanish into it. Yet Philo's story isn't lost, not entirely. Pem was a warrior for his legacy. After his death, she spent decades writing, speaking, pushing for recognition. Her book, Distant Vision, is a love letter to Philo's dream. In the 1980s, Utah school kids campaigned for a statue of him in the US Capitol, a bronze testament to a man who deserved better. He's in the National Inventors Hall of Fame, the Television Academy Hall of Fame. But these are whispers, not roars. Most people still don't know his name. That's why I'm here, why Obscure Minds exists, to dig up these stories, to make you see the faces behind the things we take for granted. The question of why Philo faded isn't just a look back. It's a spark for what comes next, a chance to rewrite the story we tell. Philo's life ended, but his light, that's still burning, waiting for us to fan it into a flame. Why does this matter? Because Philo isn't just a name. He's every dreamer who dared to change the world, only to be forgotten. Philo's life is a mirror, showing the cost of genius in a world that loves results, but not always the hands that make them. Every time you watch a game, a speech, a viral clip, you're touching his work. The fall of the Berlin Wall, the Olympics, the moments that bind us. They flickered to life because a kid from Utah believed pictures could travel. But his story shows the cracks, corporate spin that buries truth, a society quick to cheer brands over people, dreamers too humble to shout their own names. I've seen it in labs, in papers, in lives. Brilliance overlooked because it didn't have a logo or a loud voice. That comes with a challenge. Don't let it happen again. We can't change 1971 when his obituary was a whisper. We can't undo the years he spent in debt, his health crumbling, his fusion dreams stalled. But we can rewrite what comes next. Start small, say his name. Tell a friend about the boy who saw lines in a field, the man who fought for his vision, the genius who paid a price for our screens. Share his story at a dinner table, in a classroom, on a post. Every mention is a spark, a chance to pull Philo from the shadows where RCA and time left him. It's not just about Philo, it's about the others like him. Right now, someone's tinkering in a garage, coding in a dorm, sketching in a notebook, chasing an idea that could shift the world. They might not have a PR team or a billion-dollar backer. They might be one lawsuit, one bad day from giving up. If we forget Philo, we risk forgetting them. As a scientist, I've met these dreamers, quiet, stubborn, brilliant, and I know their work thrives when we notice. Channels like Obscure Minds exist for this, to find the forgotten, to lift their stories so the next Philo doesn't fade. History isn't a closed book, it's a conversation. Pem knew that. After Philo's death, she fought for him, writing Distant Vision, speaking to anyone who'd listen, until she passed in 2006. Her love wasn't just for Philo, it was for what he stood for. Thanks to her and to advocates like Utah kids who got Philo a statue, he's not entirely gone. He's in halls of fame, in archives, in whispers of tech history. But whispers aren't enough. We need roars. Yours, mine, ours. Imagine a world where kids grow up knowing Philo like they know Edison or Einstein. That starts with us, right here, right now. Think about television itself. It's not just a box or a stream, it's a bridge. Philo saw it connecting cultures, teaching truths, showing us we're not so different. Sure, it's got ads and fluff, but it's also given us moments that matter. Civil rights marches, moonwalks, voices from places we'll never go. Every time it does that, it's Philo's dream flickering through. By honoring him, we're not just fixing a wrong. We're recommitting to that vision. We're saying innovation should lift, not divide, that creators deserve their due, not a footnote. As a scientist, I believe that's worth fighting for, and I hope you do too. Here's how you can start. Share this story. Text it, post it, talk it up. If you're a teacher, slip Philo into a lesson. If you're a coder, a maker, a dreamer, let his grit inspire your next step. And if you're just someone who loves a good tale, carry this one forward. At Obscure Minds, we're all about these stories, not just to tell them, but to make them matter. Every like, share, or comment you leave helps us dig deeper, find more Philos, more heroes history missed. You're not just a viewer, you're part of this mission to rewrite the narrative, to make sure genius gets its due. Philo's life teaches us something bigger. The world we live in, screens, tech, connections, comes from dreamers who often pay a price. They don't always win parades or fortunes, but they give us pieces of the future. By remembering Philo, we honor them all. So let's make a promise, no more forgotten heroes. Let's look for them, lift them, celebrate them before they're gone. Philo Farnsworth isn't just a name, he's a spark, and it's up to us to keep it burning. If this story stirred something in you, hit that like button. It tells us you want more tales of hidden brilliance. Share this video with someone who loves history, science, or just a story that sticks. And if you're new here, subscribe to Obscure Minds and ring the bell so you never miss a dive into the lives that shaped our world. Let's keep Philo's legacy alive together. I'll see you in the next story because there are so many more waiting to be told.